HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Best Mystery Stories of the Year, 2021. Edited by Lee Child. Series edited by Otto Penzler. Introduction by Lee Child. Read by Matt Godfrey and Emily Sutton-Smith. Forward. Long ago, I came to agree with the brilliant John Dickson Carr, who wisely averred that the natural form of the traditional mystery is not the novel, but the short story. It is not uncommon for a detective story to revolve around a single significant clue, which can be discovered, divulged, and its importance explained in a few pages. Everything else is embellishment, and novels have more of this than short stories. The classic tale, as invented by Edgar Allan Poe, popularized by Arthur Conan Doyle, and perfected by Agatha Christie, is familiar to aficionados and casual readers alike. A crime, usually murder, is committed. Law enforcement officers are called in and respond with utter bafflement, and assistance is offered by a gifted amateur, a private eye, or an outlier police detective, who discovers clues, breaks down alibis, and ultimately identifies the culprit. Mystery fiction has changed a great deal over the years, as have all art forms, and as deliciously satisfying as this type of story may be, it is seldom written today. The traditional tale of observation and deduction has largely slipped into the background. The psychology of crime has become the dominant form of mystery fiction in recent years, replacing the whodunit and the howdunit with the whydunit. Those tales of pure deduction may be the most difficult mystery stories to write, as it has become increasingly difficult to find original motives for murder, or a new murder method, or an original way to hide a vital clue until the detective unearths it. The working definition of a mystery story for this series is any work of fiction in which a crime, or the threat of a crime, is central to the theme or the plot. The detective story is merely one subgenre in the literary form known as the mystery, just as are romantic suspense, espionage, legal legerdemain, medical thriller, political duplicity, and those told from the point of view of the villain. I am confident that you will find this to be a superb collection of original fiction about extremes of human behavior caused by despair, hate, greed, fear, envy, insanity, or love, sometimes in combination. Desperate people may be prone to desperate acts, a fertile ground for poor choices. Many of the authors in this cornucopia of crime have described how aberrant solutions to difficult situations may occur, and why perpetrators felt that their violent responses to conflicts seemed appropriate to them. And what a remarkable job the contributors to this volume have achieved. James Lee Burke has stated that this story is the best he's ever written. How fortunate have we been that an unknown story by the much-loved Sue Grafton was discovered among her papers by her widower and was published for the first time in 2020, 4 years after her death. David Morrell and Stephen King, two authors whose greatest successes have been on the fringe of mystery fiction, have superb entries that make us wish they wrote more in this category. Paul Kemprikos wrote his very first short story, which is so accomplished that it easily made the cut. Sara Paretsky, who doesn't write nearly enough short stories, proved once again how good they are when she does turn to this challenging form. Doug Allen is back with another highly professional thriller, as are John Floyd and Jim Allen. Plus, here's a long story by Joyce Carol Oates, arguably the greatest living writer who has not yet won the Nobel Prize for Literature. To find the best of these stories is a year-long quest, largely enabled by my invaluable colleague Michelle Slung, who culls mystery magazines, both printed and electronic, for suitable stories, just as she does short story collections, works by a single author, and anthologies, works by a variety of authors, popular magazines, and perhaps the richest trove to be mined, literary journals. As the fastest and smartest reader I have ever known, she looks at about 3,000 stories a year, largely to determine if they are mysteries, and then to determine if they are worth serious consideration. I then read the harvested crop, passing along the best to the guest editor, who completes the selection process to arrive at the 20 that comprise this book. 10 additional stories are listed on an honor roll. Finally, there will be a lagniappe, a bonus story from the past. Having the right person serve as the guest editor to launch this series is no small thing. Being willing and agreeing to perform this service is an act of extraordinary generosity. Certainly not the first such act by Lee Child, the creator of the Jack Reacher series and one of the world's most successful authors. As a national and international bestseller, you may be certain that he is asked to do something virtually every day of his life. Write a story, make a speech, sign a book, visit a bookshop or library, provide a quote for a dust jacket, offer advice about how to be a better writer or a more successful one, attend a conference or convention, and even serve as a judge on the Booker Prize Committee, which he did last year. The list goes on. Child has, at the time of writing this preface, written 25 novels in the Reacher series, beginning with Killing Floor in 1997 and continuing to The Sentinel in 2020, which he co-wrote with his brother Andrew. 2 novels have been adapted for the screen with Tom Cruise as Reacher, One Shot, released as Jack Reacher in 2012, and Never Go Back, released as Jack Reacher Never Go Back in 2016. Child had cameo appearances in both. His novels have won numerous honors from the mystery community, and he has been given Lifetime Achievement Awards by the International Thriller Writers, the British Crime Writers Association, and others. In 2019, he was named a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, for his service to literature. While I engage in a relentless quest to locate and read every mystery, crime, suspense story published, I live in terror that I will miss a worthy one. So, if you are an author, editor, or publisher, or care about one, please feel free to send a book, magazine, or tear sheet to me, care of the Mysterious Bookshop, 58 Warren Street, New York, New York, 10007. If the story first appeared electronically, you must submit a hard copy. It is vital to include the author's contact information. No unpublished material will be considered for what should be obvious reasons. No stories will be returned. If you distrust the postal service, enclose a self-addressed stamped postcard and I'll confirm receipt. To be eligible for next year's edition of the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, a story must have been published in the English language for the first time in the 2021 calendar year. I am being neither arrogant nor whimsical when I state that the absolute firm deadline for me to receive a submission is December 31st, due to the very tight production schedule for the book. Sending submissions early is better than sending them later. If the story arrives one day past the deadline, it will not be read. Sorry. Otto Penzler, February 2021. Introduction. I was delighted when Otto Penzler asked me to be involved in this new short story project. I felt the request implied he thought I had something worthwhile to offer on the subject. I'm always delighted to create that impression. But sadly, on this occasion, an impression is all it is. I don't know much about short stories, or their true origins, mechanisms, or appeal. My only consolation is I'm not sure anyone else does either. What is a short story? Clearly, there's a clue in the name. A short story is a story that's short. A story is an account of events, in this context almost certainly made up, and the adjective short acts to separate the form from other types of accounts that customarily tend to be longer. As a compound noun, short story first appeared in print in the year 1877, alongside other compound nouns new that year, including belly button, coffee table, cold storage, genital herpes, medical examiner, musical chairs, stock option, and toilet paper. Some of those things were genuinely new in the 1870s. Cold storage, certainly, which shook up food supply and started the decline of landed aristocracies by breaking their local monopolies on agricultural production. And coffee table was new as well, I suppose, given the rise of the Victorian middle class, and stock options, and toilet paper, possibly. But others among those things were merely newly named. For example, belly button, which of course we've all had forever, and probably genital herpes too. Which category did short story fall into? New, or just newly named? The latter applies, as a matter of record. A by then established literary form was first called a short story in the year 1877, so newly named. But without doubt, wrongly named. And far from being new, the form could be the oldest we have ever known. No one knows when fiction was invented, or long before that, the syntactical language that permitted it. Spoken words leave no archaeological trace. As soon as their last echoes die away, they are gone forever. All that is left is speculation. Scientific advances in the field of human origins have been spectacular, but scientists don't like to speculate. Just the facts, ma'am. They will agree, however, on a couple of things. Some explanation is needed of how a relatively weak and vulnerable and not very successful hominid proto-human later came to dominate the whole world and reach outward into the universe. How did that happen? And scientists will agree that complex, coherent, if this then that language with a plan B and a plan C would have required a big brain, which they're happy to show us because that's back in the realm of facts. It's right there in the ground. Our brains got big enough less than 500,000 years ago. There's a vigorous but very polite argument whether language colonized a freak mutation or whether the increase in size was itself driven by the absolute need for language. But either way, that's when it all started. And it was crucial. A single human was slow and weak, prey, not a predator. But a coordinated group of 100 humans was the most powerful animal the earth had ever seen. Tooled up, organized, drilled, rehearsed, if this, then that, plan B, plan C. Language came to the rescue. It made all the difference. We survived. Not that things were easy. Pressures were many and various, and sometimes catastrophic. But we stood a better chance than most. We had lengthy discussions, accurate assessments, correct recall of past events, realistic projections into the future. In other words, nonfiction saved the day. Language was a lifesaver because it was entirely about truth and reality. It could have no value otherwise. Possibly it stayed that way for hundreds of thousands of years. Then something very strange happened. We started talking about things that hadn't happened to people that didn't exist. We invented fiction. When exactly? It's impossible to say. The echoes have died away. But we can speculate. Just the guesses, ma'am. We know, because it's right there in the ground, or on rocky walls, that music and representative art date back almost 70,000 years. Both involve some kind of technical intervention. Drums with stretched skins, hollow bone flutes with holes carefully drilled for finger stops, pigments found and mixed, twigs chosen and frayed for application. Whereas storytelling required no technology. We already had what we needed. We had expressive voices and sophisticated language. So it's reasonable to guess storytelling happened much earlier than art or music. Why did it happen? Not to fill our leisure time. We had none. We were still deep in prehistory, still cognitively pre-modern, still evolving. Everything we did had a singular purpose, to make it more likely we would be alive tomorrow. Any notion or activity that didn't meet that need quickly died out, literally. How do we square that circle? How did stories make it more likely we would be alive tomorrow? By encouragement and empowerment and subtle instruction, surely. Perhaps the first made-up story was about a boy who came face-to-face with a snarling, saber-toothed tiger. Maybe the boy turned and ran as fast as he could and made it safely back to the cave, which was encouragement, in the strategic sense of maintaining morale, by delivering the message that not everything has to turn out bad. and also in the tactical sense, in that the specific terrain outside the cave was survivable, which was the subtle instruction. You had to go out and hunt and gather. A balance had to be struck between reactive caution and proactive boldness, such that the tribe endured. Then, maybe 1,000 years later, the story evolved to where the boy swings his stone axe and kills the saber-toothed tiger. The first thriller, right there. The boldness is turned up a notch. The tribe not only endures, but prospers. It's worth noting in passing those who neither prospered nor even ultimately endured are very distant evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals. On its face, that's a surprise. Compared to us, Neanderthals were faster, stronger, healthier, better tool makers, better organized socially, and more solicitous of one another. They had bigger brains than us, which surely means they had sophisticated language, possibly even better than ours. Yet they went extinct, almost 40,000 years ago. Granted, after hundreds of generations of extraordinary stress from the Ice Age climate emergency. But we survived it. Why us and not them? Those given to fanciful speculation might construct a clue from the actual in-the-ground evidence. Neanderthal settlements tell of occupation by sober, sensible people. They were sporadically nomadic, like all hunter-gatherers, but almost invariably their next settlement was barely out of sight of their last. There is no evidence they ever crossed a body of water without first being able to see land on the other side. The overall impression is one of stolid caution, whereas we, Homo sapiens, were nuts in comparison. We were bold to the point, beyond the point, of recklessness. We ranged thousands of miles into unknown regions. Hundreds of times we launched bark hulls onto giant oceans, and only a tiny percentage can have survived to see the far shore, if any. Our brains were wired differently. The Neanderthals did things we didn't, and we did things they didn't. Did that include making things up? Nothing about the jump from nonfiction to fiction was biologically preordained or inevitable. It just happened to us. Maybe it just didn't happen to our distant cousins. Maybe their sober, sensible, stolid brains couldn't provide the necessary pathway. Maybe wild imagination was required to fire the spark. What if Neanderthals never left the world of nonfiction, never entered the land of make-believe? And therefore, despite their speed and strength and health, and their technical and social skills, what if they didn't make it because of that? Because they didn't have story to encourage and empower and instruct? Maybe that tiny margin made all the difference. What do we know about the stories we had and they might not have had? Nothing, of course, but we can speculate. There would have been a strong central strand, be it encouraging, emboldening, instructing, warning, scaring, or whatever else, all wrapped up in context and diversion, and verisimilitude, but not quite. There would have been a rim of unreality, however faint, to expand our experience, which was the evolutionary purpose of story, to take us places we wouldn't normally go, to shine a beam into corners normally left dark. The stories would have been concise, pithy, and focused. They wouldn't have taken long to tell. Survival was a full-time job. Bandwidth was precious. And now, 100,000 years later, you find yourself currently holding in your hands an anthology featuring 20 outstanding contributions from 20 outstanding authors. I know many of them personally. I bet they think this forward is crazy. I bet they don't agree with a word of it. I bet they all have more plausible explanations. I bet they're going to quote from my first paragraph right back at me. I don't know much about short stories or their true origins, mechanisms, or appeal. But equally, I bet you'll agree their stories fit pretty neatly inside the 100,000-year-old scaffolding described 2 paragraphs ago. Therefore, you'll also agree the items included here should be called simply stories, and those other things their authors produce from time to time should be called long stories. Seniority should count for something, after all. Naming rights, at least. Lee Child, Wyoming, January 2021. Twice an Edgar Allan Poe Award winner, and the record holder in the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine Readers' Award competition, Doug Allan is one of the best short story writers of his generation, and probably of all time. He is also a novelist with a number of critically acclaimed books in print. The author of 11 novels and more than 130 short stories, Doug Allan has been published internationally in English, German, French, and Japanese. His most recent, Murder in Paradise, with James Patterson, was on the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks. More than 24 of his tales have been optioned for development as feature films and television. Mr. Allan studied creative writing and criminal psychology at the University of Michigan, while moonlighting as a guitarist in the rock group Devil's Triangle, and reviewing books for the Flint Journal. His background includes Chinese language studies at Indiana University and extended duty with USAF intelligence in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. Career highlights: sipping champagne with Mickey Spillane and waltzing with Mary Higgins Clark. 30 and Out. Doug Allan. The sign on the door read Sergeant Charles Marks, Major Crimes. I raised my fist to knock, then realized the guy at the desk wasn't just resting his eyes. He was totally out, slouched in his chair, his grubby Nikes up on his desk, baseball cap tipped down over his eyes, snoring softly. Looked like a Class C wrestling coach after a losing season. Edging in quietly, I eased down into the chair facing his desk. When I glanced up, his eyes were locked on mine like lasers. "Can I help you?" "I'm Jack Sledart, Sergeant Marks. Your F&G?" He frowned at that, then nodded. "The fucking new guy," he said, massaging his eyelids with his fingertips. "Ah, right. You're the homeboy the chief hired, straight out of the Army. I was reading your record. It put me to sleep." He spun the Dell laptop on his desk to show me the screen. "According to the military police, you've closed a lot of felony cases overseas. But the details are mostly redacted, blacked out. The Army'd classify 3 blind mice if they could. You don't remember me, do you? Jackson Ledart?" He glanced up at me again, looking me over more carefully this time. Not a comfortable experience. I was in my usual leather jacket and jeans, not dressed to impress. "Nah, sorry, I got nothing. Did I bust you for something?" "No, but you could have. When I was 14, you had me for Grand Theft Auto." "No kidding," he said, curious now. "What happened?" "My cousin and I were working after hours at the Shell station by the freeway, tuning up an old junker Norton motorcycle. Managed to get it running, took it out for a test drive. We made it a few miles, then a tire blew and we cracked it up." He nodded, didn't comment. "I banged my face up pretty seriously," I said, jerking a thumb toward an old scar on my forehead. "I'm bleeding like a stuck pig. We had no phone. My cousin runs to the nearest house. Nobody's home, but a pickup in the yard had keys in it. So Jimmy piled me in, drove me into Samaritan Hospital, pedal to the metal. You spotted us on the road, chased us the last few miles with lights and sirens. But at the hospital, you took one look at my face, hustled me inside, and got me some help." I shook my head, remembering. Thing is, Jimmy and I were only 14. Neither of us had a license yet, and we'd wrecked a bike and stolen a truck. You could have come down hard on us, but you stood up for us instead. When the pickup's owner came stomping in, yelling he wanted our asses arrested, you took him outside, straightened him out. "Curly Beecham," Charlie nodded slowly. "I remember now. He was half in the bag, all bent out of shape about you two borrowing his piece of shit ride. Needed an attitude adjustment is all. No big thing. It was to us. I was new to the badge back then," he said with a shrug. "Young and dumb and full of myself. Threw my weight around a lot. Till I learned not to. How do you mean? What's that rule about unintended consequences? Something about butterflies? Butterfly principle, I said. A butterfly in China flaps its wings and Hawaii gets a hurricane. Except butterflies don't know any better. Cops are supposed to be smarter, but sometimes we're not. That's what the law is for. Draws hard, clear lines, the ones we don't cross. You crossed a line for me back then. If you hadn't, maybe I'd be talking to you from a cage. And the world might be a better place. We both smiled at that. He was probably right. But his grin morphed into a frown as he cocked his head, listening to the loud music wafting up from the street. Rock and roll at concert volume. Sweet Home Alabama, Leonard Skinner. Easing stiffly out of his chair, Charlie moved to the tall window behind his desk and cracked the blinds. I stood at his shoulder, looking down on Valhalla's Main Street, 3 stories below. Northern Michigan in mid-December. Snow and sleet mixed, stinging like BB pellets in the winter wind. Down on the street, a funeral cortege was crawling past, a flatbed truck in the lead, carrying a small coffin, escorted by a long queue of pickups and motorcycles, revving their engines, adding to the din of Skinnerd blasting from the flatbed sound system. Battle flags were flapping wildly in the wind, some trucks flying Old Glory, others flying red rebel flags, the stars and bars. The flatbed was flying both, full-size banners at the head of the small casket. "What's all that?" I asked. "What we were talking about," Charlie said. "How bad things can wind up when you cross a line." "In a funeral, you mean?" He nodded without speaking, which was answer enough. Eyeing the long cortege, I noticed an old man on the flatbed staring up at me. He was maybe 60, salt and pepper beard, wrinkled black suit from Goodwill. I wondered if he was somebody I knew from back in the day. I tilted the blinds for a better look, but the truck was already passing out of our sight. Crossing a line can definitely go sideways, I conceded. But sometimes bending a rule or two is the only way to get a bad guy into a cage. Or in the dirt. "What was your date of separation, Ledart?" "A few weeks ago." "From where?" "Afghanistan. Why?" "You're back in the world now, troop. And here we call 'em cells, not cages. And dirt naps. Strictly hyperbole, Sarge," I said. "Just kidding." "Right," he said, eyeing me doubtfully. Because I wasn't kidding, and we both knew it. I'd come home from a war without rules, where I learned to live by my own. He let it pass. "Chief Cass tells me you grew up out in the county." "I'm a Woodsmoke kid," I nodded. "Raised in the deer woods." "Still know your way around out there?" "Some, sure, but nobody knows it all. There's 80,000 acres of state land spread over the 5 counties, Sarge. Daniel Boone could get lost. Which is why our brother officers in the DEA have asked us for a guide. They got a call on their tip line about a motorhome parked deep on state land. Their GPS coordinates put it somewhere inside this red circle, but they've got no idea how to get there." He tapped a computer key, then swiveled his laptop to face me again. I leaned in, scanning the screen. It took me a moment, but then I recognized a few landmarks. They're circles just beyond the North Fork of the Black. It's swampy ground, but there's an old logging road just east of it. That road is the only way an RV could make it in. I can get them there. It won't be easy. The DEA strike team will be mostly newbies, recruits fresh out of Quantico. We'll have our hands full with them. We? You're going? Why wouldn't I? The chief said you're short, almost out the door. 8 days to my anniversary, he said with a broad grin. 30 and out. 30 years from the day I signed on the Valhalla force as a rook. It'll be rough going out there, Charlie, and I owe you one. Why not relax? Put your feet up for once. Let me handle it. You think I'm ready for a rocking chair, Ledart? You're the FNG here, not me. I didn't mean it that way. Then let's get something straight.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?